To say there's some questions about the Dolphins cornerback room would be putting it mildly, but just how bad is this room relative to some of the other bad position rooms the Dolphins have had in recent years? We're exploring that here today on Locked On Dolphins.
You are Locked On Dolphins, your daily Miami Dolphins podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
All right, Miami, welcome to another episode of Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day here on the Locked On Network. I'm your host, Kyle Krabs, a lifelong Miami Dolphins fan, host of Locked On Dolphins, co-host of Locked On NFL Scouting, author of Touchdown Miami on Substack, and NFL staff writer for A to Z Sports. Want to give a special welcome and shout out to our everydayers, because it is your team every day. We don't just say it, we live it here on the Locked On Network. Today's episode of Locked On Dolphins is brought to you by Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off of your first purchase. Today on the show, looking at the 2025 cornerback room, and I had somebody who had asked me just yesterday this question. How bad is the Dolphins 2025 cornerback room based off of what we know right now versus the 2019 roster, right? And this is, I guess, a thing that's going on right now on Dolphins social media fan accounts, comparing, contrasting, invoking the 19 roster and talking about the 2025 football team. So I want to start by looking at the 2025 cornerbacks. And then what I did is I went back through every roster, 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, and finally 19. And I identified what I feel like are the worst position rooms in each one of those rosters. And there's an interesting kind of trend between positional value and positions that are important for building a roster. And I think that's the one thing where the cornerback room stands out, is it is a premium, is perceived to be a premium position across the NFL. And there's no question, when you look at the cornerback room, there's some incomplete evaluations. There's some quality depth players. There's rookies. There's one sufficient level starter with how I have it graded right now. But the rest of it is just kind of, we're waiting to see, right? We want to know who's going to get added to this room. It's perceived that there is going to be a free agent addition to this room. But here's who the Dolphins have now. Okay, I want to talk through the profile of each one of these players. Kader Kohou, face of the cornerback room. Fourth year, former undrafted free agent, very quickly outplayed that undrafted free agent status out of Texas A&M Commerce. A lot of press man in his background coming out of Texas A&M Commerce. Obviously, the Josh Boyer scheme put him in a position to be able to have playing opportunities and lean into his strengths right away as a player. He has since diversified. He's had 3 different defensive coordinators in 3 years. It's the first time he has the same defensive coordinator in back-to-back seasons since he's been in the NFL. Primarily a slot player through his first 3 seasons. I think if you tell me Kader Kohou's like one of your top 2 CBs and can play outside or would play outside, I think he'd be a sufficient level starter in that role and opportunity. I thought he was really good over the last 6-7 weeks of the season last year. Felt like the scheme he kind of fell into the scheme. It's a gamble, but everything you do is a gamble, and he's back on a 1-year restricted free agent tender. That's the Kader Kohou story. CB2 right now, is it Artie Burns? That's the second name out of everybody's mouth during OTAs and minicamp and talking about the Dolphins cornerback room. And this is a player who has experience with the system. He was in Seattle last year with Mike McDonald. Of course, was in Baltimore before he left to go to Seattle for the head coach, which is where Anthony Weaver also was. So a lot of time on task this past year, and in 24 played the Week 18 game, meaningful snaps, and looked really good, but is not a player who has been charged with any meaningful football for an extended period of time in quite some time. The last time that Artie Burns, I'll make sure I get my exact numbers right here, played more than, let's say, 300 snaps in a season for Artie Burns 2018. As a third-year player in Pittsburgh, former first-round pick, he has started 14 games from 2019 to present day. There's not a lot of opportunity that has been had here. Now he's some special teams contributions. In Seattle in 23, he played almost 200 snaps of special teams. So you put him in that bucket of can be a veteran backup player, experience in the scheme, a little bit of an aging player, right? He just turned 30 on May 1st. Be a teams guy for you. Ideally, that's like a CB 4, 5, 6 on your depth chart. In a perfect world. Right now, that's CB2. You continue your way down the depth chart. You have Cam Smith. I just wrote a story on Cam Smith last night for A to Z Sports. But I think the Dolphins openly challenged Cam Smith, a former second-round draft choice, to grow up this offseason. And Chris Greer said publicly, we told Cam we can't wait to hold his hand anymore. It's time to go. He's either going to make a leap. He's going to continue to tease you. He's going to be banged up like he was last year with 2 separate IR stints. Or maybe if he doesn't get out of the muck of players that he's in, you could see him potentially be somebody that I don't think they would cut him, but they may explore exit opportunities. Right? It's you're talking about $1 million in dead cap to move on because it's a year 3 player on a rookie contract. But yeah, I think that would have to be a trade situation. I don't think that anybody's eager to cut Cam Smith as a second-round draft choice, but the draft profile is only going to take you so far, right? And Cam Smith, his rookie season was very unfavored by Vic Fangio. Cam played 133 defensive snaps last year. He did play 210 special team snaps as a rookie across 15 games. So that's your top 3 from a experience and investment standpoint. And then you get names like Storm Duck, 5th-round draft pick, Jason Marshall, Ethan Bonner, who was a UDFA from a couple of years ago, and he lapped Cam Smith in 23. Kendall Sheffield is a former veteran player that's never really caught on anywhere, had any meaningful opportunities to play. An undrafted free agent this year in BJ Adams, an undrafted free agent from last year in Isaiah Johnson, who I really like. I personally like him better than Storm Duck based off the preseason stuff last year. That's the room. And your CB2 is probably best served to be a CB5. It is not a good group from top to bottom based off of what we know. Now, the competition, you're hoping people elevate and step up their game, but who is it going to be? And what is the floor and the ceiling of that group? Well, I think for me, I classify this group. I have a sufficient level starter in Kader Kohou. I think I have a quality depth player in Artie Burns. I have an incomplete evaluation in Cam Smith. I have an incomplete evaluation in Storm Duck, who's played more snaps than Cam Smith's played in 2 seasons. I have a rookie in Jason Marshall, who I have no idea what he is. I have Ethan Bonner, who I'm inclined to believe is going to end up being a replacement level player, but didn't really play a lot last year. If it's going to happen, it should happen now for him. I have a replacement level player in Kendall Sheffield, and I have an incomplete evaluation in Isaiah Johnson and another rookie in BJ Adams. So as you score that out, you got a lot of closely contested, unproven players. It makes for an uncomfortable room. Now, you add another sufficient level starter to this, you could say, hey, if we stay healthy this year, maybe we feel like we could work with a little bit. Big if. This is the Dolphins, right? But I want to look at and compare this room before ultimately ranking it versus these other underwhelming roster spots and weak points that the Dolphins have had. As I said, I went through 24, 23, 22, 21, 20, and 19, and identified some of the worst position rooms in recent memory for the Dolphins and their offseason rosters and how this cornerback room compares to that. That's next here, Locked on Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. You ever decided last minute you want to head to a ball game with your family or friends? Maybe it's game day. You suddenly realize you want to be in the stands for yourself. It's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you could splurge on food, drinks, merch, parking, park a little closer to the ballpark, or even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually go down the closer you get to first pitch or puck drop or tip, whatever, kickoff. But it's not just sports. There's concerts, comedy, theater, and more. And with their incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and lowest price guarantee, you can take all of the worry out of buying tickets. So take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off your first purchase. Terms to apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONNFL for $20 off. Download Game Time app today. Last-minute tickets for the lowest prices, guaranteed. So the 24 group, thank goodness Calais Campbell happened, because it would have been defensive tackle, right? You have Benito Jones and Deshaun Hand. I thought both those guys ended up being quality depth players, but had to play larger roles than that because names like Tier Tart and Jonathan Harris, they didn't materialize for you the way that you thought you would. Remember, they had this kind of smorgasbord of different role players that they brought in to kind of blast it and see what stuck. And it ended up being Benito Jones and Deshaun Hand. Benito Jones obviously back. Deshaun Hand left in free agency. So I ended up going with the guard group because you had Isaiah Wynn off of a season-ending injury the year before. You ended up not seeing him until December. Whoopee. Robert Jones, Liam Eichenberg, Jack Driscoll, Lester Cotton, Chasen Hines, and Matthew Jones. Those were the guards last year. So when you didn't know when, pun intended, you were going to see him, and it ended up being not till really late in the year. So Jones, Eichenberg, obviously your starters. You thought, hey, in a perfect world, this guy's to come off the bench and play half of football for you. You could be a guy who's had some playing experience. There's some positional versatility with Eichenberg. Maybe they're quality depth players, but as starters, they are replacement level players. And you dealt with them all year. And then you surprisingly cut Jack Driscoll, who I thought gave you some of the best stuff on tape in the preseason. Lester Cotton, Chasen Hines, Matthew Jones. The way that I had this group graded last year was Isaiah Wynn, sufficient level starter, but with the injury, red flag. Robert Jones / Liam Eichenberg, with the expectation that one of them was not going to be starting, you could make the argument was quality depth player because there's experience and some scheme flexibility or position flexibility within the scheme. They both obviously had their big opportunities, and neither one of them proved to be anything above. They failed to meet expectation with the bumpers that the Dolphins played their offense with last year. Driscoll, I would have as a quality depth player. Lester Cotton as a replacement level player. Chasen Hines, a replacement level player. And Matthew Jones, obviously an incomplete evaluation because he hasn't played. That's a group that has some pretty close mirrors to the cornerback room, with the exception being Kader Kohou, who is healthy this year, coming into the year as the sufficient level starter at the top of the room. So at least versus the guards, you're not automatically taking your best player and saying, see you in week 15, best of luck to you. That helps. But I'm going to rank them at the end. I'll say where I think the cornerbacks rank out of this. I ended up having, I think, 9 total position rooms. The 23 tight ends is a doozy of a group with Durham Smythe, rookie at the time, Julian Hill, Eric Saubert, Tanner Connor, Tyler Croft, Elijah Higgins as a rookie who did not make the roster. Smythe, at that point, I would have classified as a quality depth player as the best player. Julian Hill is a rookie. Eric Saubert, I would have as a probably a quality depth player. Tanner Connor, that was year 2 for Tanner Connor, incomplete evaluation. Tyler Croft, I would have had as a replacement level player. And Elijah Higgins is another rookie. So you have a quality depth player, and then that's really it. Now, obviously, from a positional value standpoint, you look at cornerbacks versus guards and tight ends, you probably feel a little bit better about having those questions at guard and tight end as far as the big picture of how your football team operates. Obviously, the Dolphins felt both of those areas and their shortcomings throughout the course of the 23 and 24 seasons. But at the same time, it was one of those things where you felt like if you had proper play at the other spots, you could probably keep your head above water and work around it. Where the cornerback situation, you're banking on a non-premium position in safety, and then your pass rush to offset the question that you have here at one of the areas where you could really dictate how teams play. So that's the big difference. In 2022, I would say probably the off-ball linebackers was the biggest question on the roster. Remember this day, you're back into the window where you had Robert Hunt at guard on the roster. 22 is when you signed Teron Armstead to kind of bolster the tackle room while Austin Jackson was an incomplete and unestablished player. You had Teddy Bridgewater, backup quarterback in 22. I think linebacker's the right place to look at here, where it was Jerome Baker, Elandon Roberts, rookie Channing Tindall, Duke Riley, and Sam Eguavoen was your top five linebackers in 22. Baker, I would have had as a sufficient level starter as the floor. Any given week, you might have been able to say back in 22, you'd play him up to be potentially a quality starter. But then Elandon Roberts, I thought, was a very hyper-specific role player, and you really didn't have another complementary player. Like Eguavoen was a special teams guy. Duke Riley, very clearly a special teams guy. Channing Tindall is a rookie. I thought you had one player at linebacker and then a bunch of question marks. And I think you can reflect back on some of the games that you played against teams that had quarterbacks that could run in 22 with what Baltimore did to you offensively and what Justin Fields did to you offensively that year. And obviously Josh Allen and what he did to you in the second game that you played in 22, and then the playoff game in 22. That group, I think, really hurt you when it was all said and done for what they brought and their influence in the areas where Miami really struggled, which is tight ends, running backs, and mobile quarterbacks. So linebackers, tight ends, and guards now firmly in the spotlight. You get back to 2021, it's another non-premium position. It's running backs. This is, I think, the closest room that you have to one that is worse than, like, comfortably worse than anything else that we're talking about. Because I would say at least you had a sufficient level starter with Kohou and with Wynn at guard last year before it was apparent he wasn't coming back on time, and Baker was a sufficient level starter. So 23 tight ends was bad. But you did have two quality depth players. 21 running backs was Myles Gaskin, Malcolm Brown, Jared Dokes, Patrick Laird, Savon Ahmed, and Jordan Scarlett. Not a good room. And then 2020 running backs was Jordan Howard, Matt Breida, Myles Gaskin, Kalen Ballage. Top four backs. Not a great room. Just put it that way. So I think 2020, 2021 running backs is very much under the microscope for me as far as how bad did this room get. I think the 2020 tackle room also jumps out at me, where it was rookie Austin Jackson, Julian Davenport, Jesse Davis, and Nick Kaltmeyer, top four tackles. You had Robert Hunt, who played some tackle for you as a rookie, but ultimately would go on to be an interior player. And then in 2019, I'm going to save 2019 for after the break, because this roster, going back and looking at it, is an absolute fever dream for what you had in some spots. So we're going to get into that next here on Locked On Dolphins. Make sure you guys stick with us. (2019) offensive tackles: Jesse Davis, Isaiah Prince, Jamarcus Webb, Andrew Donnell, and then Julian Davenport after the Tunsil deal. And Davenport went on IR. So Jesse Davis, Isaiah Prince, Jamarcus Webb. That group is comfortably worse than anything that we just went over, from the guards, the tight ends, the corners in 25. And the edge group might be worse. Charles Harris, Taco Charlton, Sam Eguavoen, Trent Harris, and then a fifth-round rookie, Andrew Van Ginkel, who had time on IR as a rookie in 2019. I'm not sure, looking at that right now, that you don't have a player that grades better than a replacement level player for the opportunity that they had that season. Now, Andrew Van Ginkel obviously goes on to develop with time to become a quality starter at a minimum, right? Just got a nice contract extension with Minnesota. Really happy for his successes. But rookie Andrew Van Ginkel was a JUCO transfer to Wisconsin who is a very good athlete and very raw. And the Dolphins deserve credit for the development of him as a player. You certainly wish a player that you draft and develop like that, you would have found the right price point to retain that player. But Trent Harris, Eguavon is a rush linebacker, Taco Charlton, Charles Harris. Charles Harris at least is going on to be a quality depth player once he left Miami, but in 19, no way. Nope. Jesse Davis, Isaiah Prince. So that's at least two spots on the roster that I think is comfortably the worst two spots on that we've gone over. And those are two premium positions with tackles and edges, right? That's losing football. At least these other spots are running backs in 20 and 21 and linebackers and tight ends and guards. Now it's the cornerback's turn. I think you are free agent signing away from putting this group at a position where it can be better positioned to be better than all of these groups, in my mind. Is it the weak point on the roster? Absolutely. Are there going to be some weekly matchups where it's really going to give you problems? Absolutely. It's going to make you to be really passive with your coverage shells. It's going to force you to have to win organically with your front four and win with that rush chemistry and your rush plans and how you set a pocket and how you force quarterbacks off their spot and how you interrupt their timing with the front. The good news is if you play good early down football, you have the horses to be able to do that. But it is a very different style than what us as Dolphins fans and, whether it was Howard plus Byron Jones or Howard plus the drafting of Cam Smith and then Howard plus Jalen Ramsey and then Jalen Ramsey and then bringing in a veteran player in Fuller this year. Like there's been a lot of interest in really having established players at this spot. And it is a big departure in that regard. And I think with kind of how that position room's played out over the last couple of years, it was probably due time to kind of hit a fresh restart and wipe the slate clean. Unfortunately, you just also had trench work that needed attention that prevented you from investing in this room the way that you probably would have if you had unlimited assets and unlimited resources. But I would say the 219 rooms, Harris, Charlton, Eguavon, Trent Harris, rookie Andrew Van Ginkel, who was on IR as the edge group, and then Jesse Davis, Isaiah Prince, Jamarcus Webb, Andrew Donald, Julian Davenport, tackles. Those are comfortably the two worst position rooms. I think 23 tight ends. Actually, 21 running backs is probably next on my list. And then 23 tight ends. Then I would say probably 24 guards, then 22 linebackers, then 25 corners as far as like the level of questionability that I have with the entirety of the group. And I do expect them to bolster this room a little bit. Now we'll wait and see. If it doesn't happen, the tune can very easily change. Hope nobody hears me say out of all of the bad position groups or questionable position groups that the Dolphins have had over the last 6 years, I think the 25 cornerback room is least concerning relative to these other ones. I hope you don't hear me say that and tell me I'm peddling hopium on your content feed. But that's just how I see it from a established starter, sufficient level starter, player perspective. But the fact that it is the premium position out of all of these, going back to the 2020 groups that we looked at, obviously 2019 is a different story, does make it a very compelling and interesting pathway forward. That's going to do it for us here today on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. Hope you guys enjoyed the show. Appreciate you for checking it out. Keep it locked in right here on Locked On Dolphins. It is your team every day. I'm out of here. Kyle Krabs, go Fins.